Welcome back to Will at Work. I'm Kevin. Today we have, well, it's called the Programmable TV Game Console on the box, but it's typically known as the, I believe it's the Hanimex SD70. And this is a GIMINI system, which we've talked about in the past. It's basically General Instruments. This is the GI in GIMINI. They had a number of chips, right? We talk about Pong a lot, but in the 70s, they had developed a number of games on different microchips as the 70s progressed, and more modes, etc., on the different Pong systems. The AY3 8500 or 8600. Basically had a series of the same games that we've seen multiple times. It was basically about 4 or 5 games and then 2 additional shooting games if they wanted to support that. But General Instruments also released like a stunt cycle clone, a speedway racing game, a submarine shooting game, and various other simple type games to use with various hardware. And some companies made dedicated systems to just play that particular game or games, and other companies decided later, probably around 76, 77, 78, to start doing this, which was putting the microchips on a cartridge and then having just a dummy system for the joysticks and all that sort of stuff. Now, that's not to get it confused with the other system that we call the 1292 or 2392 or 1392. But the 1292 system was similar, except that was the first programmatic ROM system. So a lot of these guys use kind of the same form factor in a lot of cases with the 1292. But the main system generally ran on a Signetics processor, which was purchased by Philips in 1975, and they would put ROMs on the cartridges, and there were a series of games for that standard, and the Interton VC4000 is probably the most popular, but there were around, I don't know, maybe 24 systems even that were 1292 compatible. They just had different cartridge shape, and we've looked at some of those in this history. This is a particularly nicer GIMINI setup, the SD70. You can take it out of the box here. It didn't come with a game, but I'm going to see if one of the games I have is compatible, because like I said, most of these all ran the same sort of stuff. So we have the joystick here. And this is obviously a kind of almost copycat of Atari, so I wouldn't be surprised if this particular unit came out around the time when the 2600 was being shown or launched. The left fire button over here and the joystick, but of course this being a Pong type system, we have an analog control stick. It does turn, but it stops right there, so I think you can probably just unscrew it. It's not really used for like Pong, etc. That said, button feels pretty good. Stick has a very long field of motion, I guess you would say. And we have our standard, what is it, like a 9? No, it's like a 7-pin DIN. I think that's what they call it, a DIN port plug. So we got 2 of those. They're both in great condition. This one's got a little dent right there, probably from some of that cable melting that happens over time. And then we have the main unit. I mean, it looks pretty much new and unplayed. can never tell with these things. They weren't sealed. You know, the problem with sealing things in general is that the seal, you know, tends to get filled with air over time, and it expands, and, you know, it doesn't usually hold up very well. And so generally most things aren't, you know, sealed in plastic. So it's, you know, we have stickers and things, but those can all be easily replaced and all that fun stuff. So we do have a plastic cover here. That's kind of nice. PC series program cartridge. So often these GIMINI systems, they were all compatible with the PC5 line of cartridges. This is PC501. Focus that in better. So here it says PC501, and this should fit in here. But it doesn't necessarily mean it will, because like I said, the form factor here, like this is kind of has a D shape to it, and this particular cartridge does not. Now, it seems like it might. But no, it does not. So I think, and this isn't that unusual, a lot of these systems, while they were ROM compatible, they were not cartridge shape compatible. Because, you know, if you were a manufacturer, you know, of these systems, you made most of your money on the games, right? Now they didn't, I believe, that nobody, including Atari, was doing loss leader type stuff yet, so they weren't losing money on console sales. They made at least a little bit of money selling the console. Here we go. So that fit there. Hopefully it doesn't blow up when we try it. But they would sell the console, and they would make a little bit of money. But when you wanted to make, you know, substantial, you know, profit, you would sell the games. Now, it takes a DC 9 volt. And because it's a Pong system, it will also take batteries. So let's go ahead and put some batteries in it, since it's a little bit safer than using the power adapters, because you never quite know the polarity. It's probably tip positive, but I've blown out 2 systems on this series and repaired them, luckily. Having the polarity backwards because I didn't know which way it went. So battery is a little bit safer. And we got a VHF channel 3, but it does say it's a PAL system, so that's interesting. It's made in Hong Kong. We'll have to see if it is PAL. That's okay. We've got a conversion to PAL, but it's a little bit more of a rigmarole to get that to go. Let's see here. So we got a, yeah, that's definitely an English adapter. So what I'll do is I will remove my Japanese step down transformer, which takes us from 120 to 100. We're not going to need that right now, since this isn't Japanese. We'll move that back a little bit. Then we'll use my big old honkin' 220 up converter. And the reason we use that is because I have this PAL device. It's a TV tuner made by Ambery, and it works rather well for this kind of a thing. So we'll get this cord here. There we go. And we want to make sure we have the joysticks plugged in as well before we start to turn this thing on. Looks like we've got one on the back here and one on each side. So my guess is the back one is probably for the light gun attachment, which we do own, but we don't have here right now. I don't think this game cartridge has any light gun games on it. Doesn't look like it. And I don't have a cartridge that plays light gun games, but they're all very simple, and I'm not going to be outputting this to a CRT monitor anyway, so we're not going to mess with that. Let's plug in the up converter. Okay, and we need to get the output from the tuner to the encoder. We'll work that out. Now, I don't generally like to collect variants or count variants. We've kind of talked about that in the past, and I'm not going to get into it again. It's just one of those things, like there's a million of them, and, you know, I'm really kind of, you know, uniquely being able to play the games is really the, you know, the reason for the hardware. And you don't need to have 5 different versions of the same hardware to play the same games. But I think that when the hardware has enough variation, then it's okay in some respects. What I mean is it's like, for instance, Analog NT. Analog is a company that makes clones of the Super NES, Sega Genesis, etc. And they're using FPGA hardware in order to do it. And if you're not familiar, an FPGA is basically like a microchip that you can design or program to be exactly like another microchip, or at least extremely close. I don't know if it is exactly the same, but it's close enough that you get essentially 100% compatibility. So if you're into, like, you know, emulating games, you know, or using emulation clone style hardware, their FPGA units would be like 100% compatible with all the games running in real time. Now, so would, of course, if you actually owned the Super NES or you owned the Sega Genesis, that would also be able to play all the games, at least in the region of the world that you're in. But where you get kind of a difference is in the with the analog systems, as you get HDMI out. Now that's substantially different because the Super NES and stuff, you have to run through converters and things. Same with the Genesis. You know, you have to have devices, and then, you know, it might be a little bit better to run them on like a dedicated system that's new, that's designed to just take HDMI. So anyway, there's other things that can do that too, I suppose, but the fact that they use the field gate programmable array, FGPA, or whatever it's called, FGPA, you know, they're substantially different, so it might be worth collecting something like that that's a little bit different. And I feel the same way with these kind of, like, you know, we looked at all these Pongs, and we look at these GIMINI systems and 1292 systems. They're all sort of different. They have different cartridge slots, they have different designs, they have different controller configurations, etc. And they're just interesting enough that, you know, they're sort of unique, but they do play the same game. So in many cases, they are variants rather than unique systems, and so it is you know, probably something that you know, one day what I'll probably do is go through my list and come up with a count of what I would consider unique systems by game, right? You know, in terms of these all play the same games, you know, so they count as one system and not different type systems, etc. But in terms of like counting the consoles that I own, Yeah, I count these as being separate consoles because they're just varying enough. But, you know, when we looked at like PlayStation and PS1, they're both basically PlayStation, so I didn't count the PS1 as a separate console, right? That's a bit silly. But I would count, say, Sega Nomad that plays Genesis games and the Sega Genesis as two different consoles because one is basically giving you a screen and it's portable, and one is still, you know, letting you play the games but more like on the TV, etc. You know what I mean? Like, but you could argue that they're basically one and the same. But I don't think most collectors would. I think most collectors would see them as two separate systems that play the same games. And so there's this. It's a fine line. It's a difficult thing, but I won't keep going yabbering on about it. But it's just something that, you know, collecting is and really sort of tuning in on what it is, you know, you are collecting. How you're defining it is a very it's a moving target kind of thing. And I don't know, one day I really need to like just come up with the rules and then lay it all out and come up with the counts, but it's not going to be today. All right, let me turn on the step up converter. Starts humming. And then we should get it on, I guess, channel 3. I don't know what that would be. It might be just channel 3, but and let's turn the power on. Let's turn the speed down on this and turn the serve to manual and hit reset. It's not so loud. All right, I'm going to switch over to the video side, assuming I get a picture here, and we'll take a look at this and see. We'll see how it looks. Here we go. Okay, looking at the SD070, you can barely see the game not quite lined up right. This is actually not in regular UK PAL mode. I had to look it up. It's a PAL M, which means that it's from Brazil. And Brazil had a weird PAL type of implementation. It basically is NTSC, North American standard, right? Television standard, but it used a PAL color set. And I believe one of the channels may, you know, have a bit of a different resolution or something. I'm not quite sure. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is that there is an alignment screws on the cartridge itself. So I figured, well, this is the best I'm getting the picture in right now because I don't really have a PAL television or anything. But I thought, well, since we're here, why don't we together see if we can tune these little bolts on the cartridge and see what they do. I even think, yeah, this particular cartridge, I believe, is in French. It could be Portuguese, which would line up with the Brazilian thing, but I think it's actually French. So let's see. Let's try the left one here. See if it does anything for us. Let's see if my screwdriver will even fit in this little slat that it's got. I have a very tiny screwdriver in it. It may even be, boy, it's hard to imagine it's bigger than that, but yeah, that's not going to fit. I have another one. Hold on, everybody. We're going to do this together and see what happens. It's going to be like a science experiment over here. Yeehaw. So I have here we go. An even finer screwdriver. We're not giving up yet. We're going to try this one. Yeah, that looks like it's going to fit. So we'll turn that to the right. That's not, I don't see it doing anything. Let's tune it back to the left. And it may be that it's for lining up the players. Although it's so weird that it's on the cartridge itself. So that didn't really do much of anything. Let's try the right one. Yeah, it did nothing. So my guess is it probably lines up the players rather than the system itself. You can select games. You can see sort of the different games being selected here. So I'm going to just, like, sometimes I open these things up and I look around, but when it comes to these sort of frequency things, I haven't had any luck, like, sort of repairing them to, to tune in better. My guess is that probably on the main board on a lot of these things, there's a way to get the composite signal straight out rather than going through these RF cables and RF modulators. And maybe one day I'll learn how to do that and put in the right resistors or whatever transistors to take the main video line and connect it to a like an RCA jack for composite out, and get a nice clean signal out of a lot of these consoles that are just kind of too old, etc. Now this one is basically in new condition, so my guess is it probably is okay. You can never tell with capacitors, but it may just in this case be one of those things where it was designed for a Brazilian television back in the 70s, and even though it is NTSC of some sort, it's just not really tuning in very well here. So we'll leave it alone. There's no point in tearing this one open since it's in nice shape. And again, maybe in the future we'll revisit it. But it's definitely a keeper. It works. It's just, as usual with these things, the signal is just a little bit out of whack since it's from another country. And I don't plan on buying a whole lot of Brazilian systems to invest a bunch of money in buying like a TV from Brazil and all that stuff. That's just going to be crazy talk. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll bring you something that probably works next time. Have a good one.